Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to David's Den. I'm David, and I make videos about Stephen King, his novels, his short stories, and any adaptations that were made for film or television. If this outfit looks familiar, it's because I just got through filming my reaction to Battleground, and now we're moving on to the next short story in Night Shift, Trucks, which means we're heading for Maximum Overdrive. We have moved on to Manhattans for Maximum Overdrive. Trucks. Actually, surprisingly enough, a pretty decent story for its concept. If you haven't seen the Night Shift reading vlogs, check that out. Or if you don't remember, Trucks is a short story that was originally published in Cavalier magazine in 1973 about this truck stop area on the highway that these people are sequestered into and held hostage by trucks, which have become sentient. And we're going to be diving into the adaptation, Maximum Overdrive, and its style, and the thematic elements to see how everything lines up. So spoiler warning ahead for All Things Trucks, the short story, and Maximum Overdrive, the film. Before we get started, and the reason we are drinking our Manhattans... No, I'm kidding. It's really not that bad. The movie is a campy horror comedy, kind of B-movie classic now. But at the time, it came out in 1986. Stephen King, the trailer of it is really ominous. It's very much a, if you want Stephen King done right, you need Stephen King to do it.
A lot of people have directed Stephen King novels and stories. And I finally decided if you want something done right, you ought to do it yourself.
Kind of a thing.
I'm going to scare the hell out of you.
Even though he'd already had people like Stanley Kubrick. I mean, I know that's another whole story. He didn't like The Shining, but we had Tobe Hooper and we had Brian De Palma. Like, we already had some pretty kick-ass King adaptations at this point. And this is, unless I have my timeline off, I think within a year of his family having an intervention to get in the way of his alcohol and drug use. So this is basically a cocaine-fueled Stephen King brain that created a movie out of arguably one of his most absurd conceptualizations for a story, and it is everything you expect it to be. I'm ready to have a good laugh. What are my notes here? It's starring Emilio Estevez, and Yardley Smith is actually in it, Lisa Simpson herself. I had totally forgotten about that. For those of you here on YouTube, the movie vlogs work like this. I pretty much watch the movie, and I kind of comment on the craft of filmmaking and give it a review as if it wasn't based on a short story, but also line it up to the short story and compare it as an adaptation with faithfulness to theme and tone as well as plot being considered. And if you want to see the full unedited watch along, you can check that out over on Patreon. You can find that link as well as all of my social media down below. And while you're there, like and subscribe, do all those things. Here we go. According to astronomical calculations, the planet would remain in the tail of the comet for the next 8 days, 5 hours, 29 minutes, and 23 seconds. That is exceptionally specific. In the short story, no reason is given. And that mystery and the threat of it being never ending is what makes it so scary. And we've just put an expiration date on whatever we're going to watch. Whatever we're watching is finite, and then we come out on the other side. So that's a huge difference. But I'm also, I don't know if it's the 80s graphics or if they're trying to go for that like old style horror 50s, 60s comics that Stephen King is known for really enjoying. And he tried to capture the feel of them in Salem's Lot. He said it in the introduction to the novel. So I think that kind of more positive spin on it comes from that idea of the EC horror comics, Tales from the Crypt and all that. And I wonder if that's what King was going for when he wrote it, but maybe didn't capture. And this is his attempt at doing so now. Stephen King's infamous cameo. You are an asshole. So if you don't know, Stephen King is known through the 80s and 90s through having cameos in most of his adaptations. I think this is only the second one we've seen because he played the band leader in the Shining miniseries. And oh my god, it's so 80s. Nice, music by AC/DC, I love it. Great. There it is, written and directed by Stephen King. So I love that this intro, we're getting multiple devices working on their own, sentiently, independently, when in the short story, we just start, and we're in the truck stop. Right, and our narrator, who's never named, it's a first-person narration, is talking about the young couple, the kids that have come in, and there's the short-order cook, and then there's a guy named Snodgrass, a salesman, who runs out right at the beginning of the story in a panic and gets hit by a truck and thrown into a ditch, killed conceivably. And then it's later on that we start getting these inklings of, I saw an airplane. I wanted to believe that there were people in it, but I couldn't. It's something like that. And the idea of machinery itself taking over, not just truck. But here we're starting to get that right off the bat. This is what I remember about this movie. The big green goblin on the front of this truck. Why? It makes no sense. It's just there to look freaky. I mean, it kind of works, right? So the whole premise of this is just so far-fetched that it's hard to buy into. And one of the beautiful things about the short story is that King basically calls it out. There's a line, I'm going to put the quote up here, where he basically says, you can't think about it too hard or it'll drive you nuts. He says, no, the concept's fucking crazy, just roll with it. And it's so subtle. And he does this 2 or 3 times in different ways throughout the short story. I think it's only like 9 or 10 pages. So we get this sense of, all right, I'm just going to say screw it and go along for the ride. And I think that may be what this face does, and this whole alien, or not alien, but comet thing, right? It gives us permission to just kind of go along for the ride. What? There's a cigarette machine in the short story that they go and break into to get cigarettes. It's not spitting things out at them. But I love this old arcade.
I know you been the college boy.
College boy, that's from Graveyard Shift.
You know what that star means, don't you? You ain't that obtuse, are you? On parole, boy.
So we're looking more at exploitation. We exploit machines, our bosses exploit us, I guess. That's more a Graveyard Shift theme than it is a Trucks theme. So I'll say King is a master at suspense, and although the concept is so funny we laugh at it, we're getting small hints here and there of the extent of the effect on these machines, right? Some of it's funny, like the cigarette machine, and then it turns dangerous, like the carver, the knife. Reminds me of Halloween 3, right? The television hypnotizing. This is one of the most infamous scenes in, like, bad film history. Oh! Very slapstick, very comic. Yeah, King was going much more for the feel of the comics than in the film than he did in the short story. Come on, coach. Shit, he'd be dead. Went, oh, yes! I saw in some article somewhere that they actually shot that and had like the head explode and the red blood and the effects, but it was too much.
I ain't been able to get diddly squat out of it the past half hour or so.
That's right from the short story. The radios are out. So this is going to be the young couple. They're not newlyweds in the short story, but they are a young couple. They're referred to as the kids over and over again. So in the short story, we get our unnamed narrator saying, I looked in the rearview mirror and I saw a semi coming down the road and its cabin was just, I think it's a flick of a finger is the analogy. knocking cars off the road. So I got off the road and came right into a truck stop. And the kids are already there, and they're saying they saw a bus coming the other direction toward them on the road, just running into cars. So what we're getting here, we're 20 minutes into the movie, and what we're getting is all of the tidbits of backstory that are literally one sentence things in the short story. And we're feeling it. We're feeling that, okay, I get it. I'm ready to move on with the story and see what happens from here.
Great God.
And time's going backwards, just because. Hugo, are you going to be in the movie? So I like for the visual medium that we got more of a close call with him. Well, I mean, we get a close call in the short story, but we're not even where the short story begins yet. Because the close call with him in the short story is when they go to the toilets outside to take the clean water out of the toilet tanks to make sure they're stocked with water. And they barely make it back inside, our unnamed narrator and the kid. Are they given names? I think Snodgrass might be the only name that's given. I kind of like that there's a more direct element of threat as we go into where the short story begins, I guess. The toy... Oh, okay, now it makes sense. The toy company truck has that face. It actually is justified. I like that. You know, I am enjoying this much more than I remember. Maybe I'll go make another Manhattan. Okay, so now we have a love interest that doesn't exist in the story. Anyone who's watched my Chapelwaite videos will know how I feel about this. I don't understand why producers and screenwriters and I mean, this is King himself, and he threw it into... I don't understand the need for there to be a love story for us to be interested. The short story is poignant on its own and very entertaining without any sort of love story. We already have the young newlyweds in this, which are just the young couple in the short story. Why do we need this? And we're back.
New York, London, New Delhi, Moscow, Peking. The reports we have are all the same. Machines apparently operating by themselves or under the direction of some agency we don't understand.
Okay, so how can the machines be under some agency that we don't understand and be reporting on it on the radio when the radio is down? And how can you get information from all over the world when radios are down? But now this radio is up. Consistency, maybe? How did he die inside the car? Some things just don't make sense. Like, I can buy a lot in a horror movie as long as there is some sort of weird, off-the-wall explanation for it. This kid doesn't exist in the short story. Well, suburbia doesn't exist in the short story. Is this supposed to be Snodgrass, the traveling salesman? So if this is Snodgrass, it's where the story begins. It's our narrator, the young couple, the short order cook, the trucker, and Snodgrass sitting in the like diner area of this truck stop, and Snodgrass is getting antsy and antsy and antsy, and he runs out and gets hit by a truck and launched off. I think it's described like a punting football kick into a ditch after hitting another truck. Ooh, the lights. That's sick. But this whole setup of people chasing him, this is different. He's being... Is it me, or did it look like the actor was running purposefully into that truck?
He's starting to draw flies.
Starting to draw flies. They talk about, in the short story, there's the girl that's the worst because flies were around her. So yeah, I'm getting the feeling that now we're trapped. Now we're at the start of the short story. So what is this? 37 minutes into it, like an hour and 37-minute film. We're finally at the start of the short story. Except we're not, because the kids haven't made it there yet, right? The young couple. Bic, 1.5 rolling papers. Can we talk about product placement, anyone?
Yeah, maybe not.
There's a lot more people involved here than there were in the short story. I'm scrunched up. She was cast for her voice. My God. Coked up king. What the? Why does he have a fucking bazooka? That makes sense. How?
Just stick me with that thing.
You don't stick a person with a straight razor. It's more like...
I love the, like, metal romance music. So not only is the romance not in the short story at all, but our first introduction, we think that they already know each other. And then at the end of that conversation, we learn that they didn't. And now here, it's as if they've been dating a while, or they're an established couple. There's no sense of direction or continuity. It's just pieces that are kind of put together. This kid exists nowhere in the short story, but I like that for the visual medium, it's giving us a sense of things happening elsewhere outside of the truck stop.
I'll tell you one thing.
What's that?
You sure make love like a hero.
So now we've had sex, because there has to be sex in a movie. But it's the 80s, so we can't show it. We only show the aftermath. There's no reason for the sex to be there. I mean, I don't mind seeing a million of us naked, but plot-wise...
And all we gotta do is stay alive for the next 7 days.
All we gotta do is stay alive for the next 7 days, right? What did we say at the very beginning of this? We've put an expiration date on the threat, which means that we've nullified most of the horror. It is interesting that they're focused on there's no motor vehicles, nothing to take over, but we've already seen the arcade, and he has seen the video game machines, right? The arcade machines fight back. It's not just the trucks, but we're treating it as if it is. Especially because on the street we only see trucks. In the short story, cars take over too. And there's a hay baler. I mean, I guess that's a truck.
There's gonna be a man laying hurt in here if you don't quit this foolishness.
If it was your man out there, you'd want someone to go, wouldn't you?
Well, it ain't. You're not going.
I'm going.
She's turning out a pretty decent performance,
Don't
actually.
make me a widow on my wedding day, Curtis.
So another thing that King is famous for saying is, I go for the horror, or the psychological suspense and horror, and if I can't get the horror, you go for the terror. What is just ha 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 on the edge of your seat? And if you can't get the terror, what is the gross out? Well, here we are getting people with shitty water, literally water, going into their mouth. Okay, so here we are, 1 hour and 11 minutes into the movie, when, like, on page 4 or 5, the truck rams the front wall and the building starts caving in. There's so much fleshed out here that isn't actual plot or story. It's just, how can we make things move on their own? Which, although interesting to watch, overall doesn't make it for a great plot. There's a certain strength in having this weaponry that doesn't exist in the short story. Miller. I used to love Miller Lite. Hi, AJ.
Now what is it doing?
It's Morse.
Oh, shit.
No, really. I should know.
They made it
In
more
America, they
believable
just
for
right.
86 that kid knows Morse code from Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts. Someone must pump fuel, someone must not be harmed. This is exactly from the short story.
We ain't got no power.
As if they heard.
What's up, big guy?
Okay, so in the short story, there's only one of them pumping fuel. And then after a number of hours, the short order cook comes out and says, hey, I'll take over, as you get kind of high from these fumes and can't go on. Our unnamed narrator says about the young girl, you gotta do this eventually. Let me go teach you how to man the pumps. And they're lined up way down the road. It's not like they're driving to the truck stop. This seems as if somebody sent out the message, come here, we have gas. So that's very different from the short story as well. They start attacking while people are in the rest stop. Right, they bring down one entire wall, or a door, they board it up, and then they bring down the entire wall. And now they've waited until people have left. There's no threat anymore. Why would they leave? And why would that blow up? Why are there mushroom clouds? Oh, God. So in the short story, there is no destruction of the rest stop. The way it ends is we switch from a past tense of this happened, that happened, and this happened, and that happened, to we are still pumping gas. It's suddenly present tense. It's very immediate. It's very relevant. It takes you very much into a place of this isn't just machines going crazy, but AI getting the better of us. And there's no alien influence. And they don't get away. They're still trapped there at the end of the story, and that's what's horrific. But here we are, we've crawled through the sewers a number of times, inexplicably, incoherently, and now we're watching the rest stop blow up, I guess. So, according to the short story, these boats would have sentience too. Is this like Area 54? I don't... So there's a reason given that doesn't exist in the short story. The continuity makes no sense. Alright, so let's look at this as a film on its own. Acting is actually fairly decent. The writing and direction, as per coked out Stephen King. Damn woman that I ever say. He wanted the sensationalism of the short story when I think there's actually something to be said about the short story. In terms of relevant theme. As a film on its own, the score worked well. The direction and the screenwriting were a little bit all over the place. Acting was fairly decent. It's campy. It's as funny as it is scary, but I would say it's more skeevy horrific than it is actually scary. And we're going to go ahead and give this a solid 2 stars as a film on its own, Maximum Overdrive. Looking at it as an adaptation, we spend 45 minutes of an hour-and-a-half movie setting up the things that are one-sentence throwaways about the history in the short story that are not needed. Now, in a visual medium, I think it works. I think it builds a suspense. But in terms of what we actually see, there should not be an expiration date on it. There shouldn't be a reason for all of this to be happening. There should be an ominous, this is never ending, rather than the expiration date. But ultimately, we had a bunch of trucks holding people hostage. So it also was exactly what the short story is. It's a little better than just right down the middle, but it's not a perfect adaptation. But I'm going to give credit to Stephen King, the writer of both the short story and the film. And we'll say 3 stars for Maximum Overdrive as an adaptation. I hope you enjoyed this watch along on Patreon or this movie vlog here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe if you did. And I will see you guys next time where I'm doing the next 3 stories in the Night Shift reading vlog, followed by the next short film, or actually feature film. I think it was a TV movie, if I'm remembering correctly, for Sometimes They Come Back, which is actually one of my top 3 favorite stories of the collection. See you guys then.